You're welcome back. You're still on to the African Broadcasting Network news. Now on to stories away from Nigeria. Egyptian investigators have said that the wreckage of the EgyptAir flight that went missing over the Mediterranean last month has been found. A statement said several main locations of the wreckage had been identified, and a deep-sea search vessel had also sent back the first images of the wreckage. There were 66 people on board flight MS-804 when it crashed on May 19th while flying from Paris to Cairo. The Airbus A320 plane vanished from Greek and Egyptian radar screens, apparently without having sent a distress call. The Egyptian Investigation Committee said that investigators on board the John Lethbridge search vessel, which has been contracted by the Egyptian government, would now draw up a map of the wreckage distribution. Earlier this month, search teams said signals from one of the black box flight recorders had been detected, and signals emitted by the recorders are expected to expire by June 24th, experts have warned. The cause of the crash remains a mystery. The United Nations Security Council has approved a crackdown on arms smuggling in waters off the Libyan coast. Under the resolution, European Union's boats charged with seizing migrant smuggling vessels in the Mediterranean Sea will also be asked to stop vessels suspected of smuggling arms. The United Nations had become concerned that arms trafficked to the country were being used by so-called Islamic State. France's United Nations Ambassador François Delattre said that the British drafted resolution had the potential to be a game changer for Libya. Under it, the European Union ships will seize and dispose of boats being used by armed traffickers, but vessels must first make efforts to obtain consent from the country where the suspected smuggling boat is registered. The European Union imposed an arms embargo on Libya in 2011 when former leader Muammar Gaddafi's forces cracked down on pro-democracy protesters. However, Libya has become increasingly lawless since Gaddafi's overthrow, and a power vacuum has allowed IS militants to gain control of parts of the country. Last year, sanctions monitors told the UN that Libya needed help from an international maritime force to halt the flow of weapons. The new government is allowed to import arms with UN approval. Niger says the bodies of 34 migrants, including 20 children, have been found in the Sahara Desert near the border with Algeria. Interior Minister Bazoum Mohamed said it appeared they had died of thirst after being abandoned by the smuggler. Mr. Mohamed said 9 of the adults were women and 5 were men. He said members of the group had died between 6th and 12th of June. 2 victims have been identified as Nigerians, but the nationalities of the others are not yet clear. Thousands of illegal migrants have traveled to Algeria in recent years, most of them via Mali and Niger. People smugglers have largely avoided Libya since it descended into political chaos. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin will look to refashion himself as a more reliable partner for the West as Moscow struggles to come in from the cold at its flagship economic forum in St. Petersburg. Putin will host European Union Commission head Jean-Claude Juncker and Italian Premier Matteo Renzi at the conference starting Thursday, just weeks before the 28-nation bloc is set to vote on extending sanctions on Moscow over the Ukraine crisis that have helped push Russia's economy into recession. The Kremlin strongman will also meet United Nations Chief Ban Ki-moon alongside the world's body envoy on Syria, Staffan de Mistura, as Moscow remains at the center of the conflict due to its military support for ally Bashar al-Assad. Juncker has warned that this visit is not an occasion for the European Union to announce any sort of change in attitude towards Russia over its March 2014 annexation of Crimea and alleged masterminding of a separatist rebellion in Ukraine. The EU insists it is still linking the lifting of sanctions to the total fulfillment of a floundering peace deal to end the conflict in Ukraine, and that the current failure to make headway on the agreement should see sanctions extended when they run out at the end of July. Despite claims from officials that the economy could be set to return to limited growth soon, there are serious fears of prolonged economic stagnation, and the authorities are pledging much needed structural reforms to attract investors. Now we'll join Temi Akwene on Sport News.